It's such a difficult thing to talk on a Sunday afternoon, and it's even more difficult to talk after Shimon's given such an eloquent speech. But I want to share something very light-hearted. That video which you showed, the second last speaker is a friend of mine. But yeah, so Shimon's given us the historical analysis of the conflict between Iran and Israel, and I think it's important that I step in and probably provide a bit more contemporary assessment of where it is that this thing is going. It is said that there's nothing permanent in life except for change. And Shimon rightly points it out, the governments can change. It doesn't matter, for example, even for dictatorships. I think even democracies can be friends one day and become bitter enemies the next. And I think the perfect example in the case of Israel is its relationship with Turkey, where there's a democracy and a democratic transformation which has resulted in, well, I wouldn't say extremely bitter ties, but not at the optimum best as well at the moment. But you also spoke about the Arab Spring, and I feel that the Arab Spring is a very big, important event for Israel and Iran to try and give up the hostility, because the Arab Spring has brought about a new change, a new idea into the thinking of the region. The traditional anti-Iranian bases, so to speak, which were there, have started to shift away. Egypt, one of the first foreign policy actions it did soon after the revolution over there, was to actually hold out a hand of friendship to the Iranians. And this is surprising because the Egyptians have had far greater hostility to Iran than the Israelis do. For that matter, like you said, like the Iranians would, with their nuclear weapons, want to target Israel. The first target of the Iranians after they get a nuclear weapon is not going to be Israel. Israel, in my opinion, is going to be the second target. The first target is going to be Saudi Arabia. So which is where I feel that when you talk about the question of what if Israel and Iran would give up to hostility, can this be? And this can be. This can be because there's a tectonic shift on how the people on the ground are seeing this change. They're seeing a civilizational and cultural shift on how they see Iran. We can see the shift because Iran will become weaker. Iran's regional focus and its regional alliance with the Hezbollah in Lebanon has become weaker because the Hezbollah has had to move out of, the Syrian forces had to move out of Lebanon, and the Hezbollah is in two minds on how to project itself inside Lebanon at the moment. It's starting to see itself as a political party and trying to shift away from being a militia. In the recent conflict in Operation Cast Lead, for example, while Israel was being bombarded by rockets from the south with Hamas, Hezbollah kept quiet. Was it a result of the previous conflict it had with Israel? I argue it's because the Lebanese and Hezbollah as a militia is starting to reassess its role in how to approach the Israeli conflict. The current Arab Spring, or as I like to call it, the tectonic movements in the Gulf region, is weakening the Syrian regime of Assad. The weakening of the Assad regime has actually resulted in the strengthening of another empire over there, which is the Ottoman approach, which is the Davutoglu doctrine from Turkey. Turkey, which was an ally of Syria, is starting to move against Syria, and I feel this is because they want to encroach upon this particular territory and field. The minute Syria is lost out, Iran becomes weak from within. If Iran becomes weak from within, again, its primary and traditional rivalry will go with the Saudis. It will not come to the Iran. It's definitely the rhetoric against the Israelis, the Israelis. The rhetoric against the Israelis will exist, but their focus will be in the Saudis. And so the Iranians are trying to, in their statements on the Arab Spring, they're trying to put the focus back on the Shia sections of Saudi Arabia. So where do I see the Israelis combining on this particular front? For one thing, because of what Egypt has done, in the backdoor channels, the Israelis and the Saudis have managed to get together on some level. The Saudis have offered the Israelis overflight rights to target Iran. They're having intelligence cooperation on a far better level. The Israelis have had economic cooperation with Qatar, which is another very important state. Qatar was one of the first Arab states to go ahead and bomb Libya. The Israelis are able to put a dialogue into the hands of the rest of the Arab partners, which is something very significant for them to move ahead. And so this can actually be a point of focus where you can actually build a relationship with the Arab partners, and through that build an alliance with the Iranians. It's a far-term goal, but I think it's definitely possible. Sorry, I'm just going to go to the second question here. So where is it that the Israelis and the Iranians can really cooperate on this one thing? They can cooperate on energy. The Iranians, for their oil exports, their oil exports are dwindling. The capital infrastructure is low. They need the Indians. They need the American and European sanctions to be removed for any kind of improvement in their oil technology. The oil content has about 90% of it is sulfur. So the refining costs actually make Iranian oil less of a feasible application for India and the other countries which are taking it at the moment, which is being filled up by, the gas is being filled up by Qatar, the oil is being filled up by the Saudis and Sudan. So the Israelis and the Iranians can actually work in terms of oil security. The Israelis would need it. They can work on oil security. Can India be a bridge between the two countries and the people, and how? I am strongly opposed to India playing any kind of role over there. The one country which actually came to India and asked the Indians to play a mediation between them and Israel was Syria. And India said, no, we're not getting involved in that. The one country which tried to play a role in mediating between the two, burnt its fingers in a way, was Turkey. We have our own interests in the region, and we should go about protecting our interests without getting involved in it. We do not have good ties with Iran. Civilizational ties is civilizational ties. Politically, we do not have good ties with Iran. Nirupama Rao, the former foreign secretary, has said it on record. She has said that the ties with Iran are good on paper. It's just a show. It's not as strong as we make it out to be. We've had certain naval exercises with Iran which have not really gone anywhere. We've tried to build the Shah Bahar port as a link into Afghanistan, as a link into Central Asia. It has not worked. Our growth with Iran corresponds with the Chinese growth with Pakistan. The Chinese tried to build a Gwadar port in Balochistan, and we tried building the Chah Bahar port. The Chinese stopped building the port in Gwadar, and we stopped building the port in Chah Bahar. This is not how bilateral relationships work. Bilateral relationships do not work on a larger triangular relationship. If we are doing anything with Iran, it's based on a third party. The United States was talking to us and asking us to review our NPT norms, and so we decided to go ahead and do a smaller naval exercise with the Iranians in retaliation to that. This is not how it works. This is not how bilateral relationships work. The Iranians have not been able to get over the fact that they're traditionally and civilizationally, they've had links to India, and that we see from the Mughal architecture in our country and through the examples of their high officials. Every now and then, there's a very famous example which is given by the pro-Iranians in our country who say that in 1994 in the UNHRC, Iran supported India in a vote against the Pakistani resolution in Kashmir. What they do not talk about is, immediately after that vote took place, the Iranian ambassador led ambassadors from the OIC to Kashmir, did a major demonstration condemning India, and highlighted to the fact that maybe the Iranians were wrong in having opposed the Pakistanis. The Iranians play a double game, we play a double game, it's understandable, but there is a myth to the fact that India-Iran relations are strong. A senior Iranian diplomat was supposed to visit India, and as protocol, the MEA, and I spoke to the secretary who was involved in this, said to me that they were going to arrange a trip to the Taj Mahal for him. He said, I don't want to go to Agra to see the Taj Mahal. I want to go to Agra to see the tomb of a poet in the Mughal era. And this really got the MEA a little tied up in knots. And why is this gentleman wanting to see some tomb of some small-time poet in Agra? So they had to call up the ASI. The ASI then had to go digging up researches, and they found this unmarked grave, and they found out this is the tomb of a famous poet of the Mughal Empire. And why is it that the Iranian diplomat wanted to visit that as opposed to the Taj Mahal? He wanted to visit the tomb of that particular poet because that poet was responsible for continuing the legacy of the Mughal rule in India. The story goes that the emperor had, in a drunken fit, divorced his wife. And he realized that if his wife is divorced, he loses a lot of credibility among his people. And he was in a quandary because the religious scholar had said, you've divorced your wife, you cannot marry her again until she marries someone else. And if this story had gone out to the public, then his credibility would have gone low, and it would have been a significant dent to the Mughal rule in India. What this gentleman then did is, he spoke to the poet about it. The poet is a friend of his. The poet told him, you let your wife marry your brother then divorces her, and you can marry her the next day. And that's exactly what happened, and that is how the continuity of the Mughal rule happened in India. And to celebrate the continuity of that Mughal rule in India, this particular diplomat wanted to pay his obeisance to this poet. And this is how the Iranians think. The Iranians hold a grudge. They're not forgiving people. They hold a grudge, and they will continue with it. The Iranians see India having opposed Iran at the United Nations Security Council, and will continue with that idea till the end of time. There is no possible way, in my personal and professional opinion, that the Indians can play a constructive role when working with Iran. The Iranians have shifted their goalposts when it comes to India. The Iranians have started to talk to the Haqqani network in Pakistan. The Iranians already have the Hekmakhtiar network to work with in Afghanistan. They do not want to work with India anymore. They have burnt their bridges with Pakistan once before, but they never learned the lesson in that sense. The only reason why India and Iran got together in Afghanistan was because of the massacre in 1996 in Mazar-e-Sharif of the Iranian diplomats by Pakistani-backed Taliban mercenaries. However, the Asia Times correspondent who was killed in Pakistan, Shehzad Chaudhry, had in his last piece, before he was assassinated, had spoken about negotiations between Iran and the ISI. He spoke about how the ISI had spoken to the Iranians, apologized for that particular incident, had decided to move on, citing the case of the Haqqanis who said, we're not anti-Shia, we can work with you. In response to this cooperation, we see that the Rigi brothers, the leaders of the Jandola group, which was opposed to Iran, were captured with the help of the ISI, given to the Iranians, and the Iranians then hanged them. The Iranians are no friends of India. The third question is, what role can the youth of the three countries play in bringing these people together? The one thing which is very important in a democracy is you need to doubt everything. And this is not a Marxist thought. It's actually a thought which comes from Gautam Buddha, who said, you've got to doubt everything and believe it in your own light. We're talking about a region which is replete with conspiracy theories and conspiracy stories. What India can do, in a very limited role, what India can do is we can be an impartial observer. We should not jump the gun in supporting the lies which come out of there. An example being the Mavi Marmara. This does not necessarily involve Iran, it involves the Turks. But that particular ship, and the way India jumped at the opportunity to condemn the Israeli commando raid on that particular ship, reflects of how India can play a role in keeping a distance, learning the facts, and then coming on board. That is what the youth of this country needs to do. The youth of this country needs to realize we are not a part of that conspiracy circus which is going on in the Middle East. We need to realize that we are responsible members of the international community who look at the facts, learn the facts, see the ground situation, and then respond to it. We do not have to jump on either side of the flag. We can build, through social networks such as this, a discussion among the Iranians and among the Israelis in informal settings. But as I mentioned earlier, do not go into the formal setting. It's far too murky a water. I think that's the last question. Well, I'll stop over there. Thank you.